जानिबे बतहा गुजर कुन।
There's a word in Arabic called Hilya. It comes up over and over again in various circumstances and is generally thought of to mean embellishments or ornaments and things of that kind. Well, it has a second meaning. The meaning is wasf, or description. And it plays a very big part in early Islamic literature. And it plays a very big part, especially in telling us things about the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wa sahbihi wasallam. The word is sometimes misunderstood, but if you go back in the old dictionaries, you can pretty well track it down. In his time, there were a number of people who knew him so well and so intimately that they would describe him to other people who hadn't seen him before. Among these people, of course, was Ali ibn Abi Talib, and another was Hind ibn Abi Hala. When asked to describe him, they would make these condensed jewels of composition, which were called hilyas. They were memorizable and portable in a sense in the memory. Now, a number of these things were used for people other than the Prophet. For instance, in the old book Qasas al-Anbiya by Imam Tha'labi, we have a very interesting one. I'm going to work up to the Prophet from a different stage here. Where in this book a number of them were done for other prophets like Adam, Yusuf, Dawood, Sulaiman, Yahya, Jesus, alayhim assalam. And so here's one just to get the feel of how these things work. This is the one, it was related by Ka'b al-Ahbar, and it's about Sulaiman, what he looked like, a little bit about him. It says, in my translation, he was of pale complexion, his body was large, very clean and beautiful. He was humble and unpretentious and associated with the poor and would keep company with them. He would say, the poor one must sit with the poor. In the days of his father Dawood's reign, Dawood alayhi salam would consult him because of his advanced intellect and knowledge, and in spite of his young age. We also have hilyas or descriptions of the same kind for Abu Bakr, Omar, Uthman, and Ali. Now, the Prophet's hilya, that's a calligraphic version of it, and I'll get to the details of it in a minute. This thing reads, pardon my Arabic, it's not that great, but An Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu kana idha wasaf al-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam قال لم يكن بالطويل الممغط ولا بالقصير المتردد كان ربعة من القوم ولم يكن بالجعد القطط ولا بالسبت كان جعدا رجلا ولم يكن بالمطخم ولا بالمخثم وكان في الوجه تدوير أبيض مشرب أدعج عينين أحدب الأشفار جليل المشاش والكتد أجرد ذو مسربة شثن الكفين والخدمين إذا مشى يتكلأ كعندما يمشي في صبب وإذا التفت معا بين كتفيه ختم النبوة وهو ختم النبيين أجود الناس صدرا وأصدقهم لهجة وألينهم عريكة وأكرمهم عشيرا من رآه بديهة هابه ومن خالته معرفة أحبه يقول ناعته لم أرى قبله ولا بعده مثله صلى الله عليه وسلم اللهم صل وسلم على نبي الرحمة وشفيع الأمة Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi. That's the Arabic version of it. Now, let me give you now a translation of that. It's transmitted from Ali. We know who he was. Who, when asked to describe the Prophet, would say, he was not tall and stretched out, nor short and compressed. Very vivid language. These words are so rare that we had to recently in Istanbul make a sort of a dive back into the old dictionary so we could kind of make a little glossary just for this hilya so people could understand what it means. He was medium-sized. His hair was not short and curly, nor was it lank, but in between. His face was not pudgy, but there was a bit of a roundness to it. His skin was pale, his eyes were black, he had long eyelashes. He was big-boned with wide shoulders. large joints. He had no body hair except in the middle of his chest. He had thick hands and feet, and when he walked inclined as if descending a slope. When he looked at somebody, he would turn his whole body towards them. Between his shoulders was a seal of prophecy, the sign that he was the last of the prophets. He was the most generous-hearted of men, the most truthful of them in speech, the most mild-tempered of them, and the noblest of them in lineage. Whoever saw him spontaneously was in awe of him, and whoever associated with him familiarly loved him. Anyone who would describe him would say, I never saw before or after him the like of him. Alayhi-Salatu Wassalam. Now, these Hilyas were passed down through memory and transmission, and in the what is the dates? In the 18th century, a calligrapher named Hafiz Osman, who's called the second sheikh. Calligraphers also have sheikhs. And he was actually the first one of the line was Sheikh Hamdallah, and he was a sheikh of a Sufi group that specialized in archery. You know, some people have different things, and in that group it was archery. He was a terrific shot, by the way. But Hafiz Osman was a man who, when he read these things, he was moved to write it into calligraphy. Previously, it was only found in the books. Like this, it was found. This particular version I just read to you comes from the Shama'il of Tirmidhi, and a number of other books have very good ones, like the Shifa of Qadi Iyad, which we'll get into a little bit. And then there are a number of single, transmissions and things that have been joined together to make longer ones. In any case, Hafiz Osman wrote this thing in the shape that we're familiar with now. We'll go back to the... Oh. In any case, under that, there was an ayat, generally speaking, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ, or وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. And then under that, the finishing part of it. Now, this one here is Hafiz Osman's. Unfortunately, the paper on it became very dark, and it's very hard to read it, but that's one of the very first ones that was ever written. It's about 1745 somewhere where that was done. Now, after that, the calligraphers copied it in many different versions, but basically like that. This is one of his work. He made over 250 of these. Some of them are over 6 feet high. How did he have the time to do it, and all of the other things? That's a mystery that nobody will ever solve. But he and his students, many people made these things. For some reason, they never really caught on outside of the central part of the Ottoman Empire. They were never popular, for instance, in Arabic countries. This one was done in the Nastaliq script, which is very much like what is used to write Urdu. And this one was done by Hilya-i-Saadat Mehmed Effendi, a man who was totally handicapped. His right side of his body was paralyzed at birth, and his left side had the shakes. And he was able to become one of the finest of all the calligraphers. And his son, he was a tiny man. They carried him around in a basket when he was weak, and they would put him in a basket to take him to his various teaching and religious duties. This was by him. He was the first one to write it in Nastaliq script, and his son, Hilya-i-Saadat, that one is by his son, who also became one of the Supreme Court judges, but he only lasted in the job for about a year because he had a horrible habit of exaggerating everything. If there were 10 men in the room, there would be 100 in his count, and so he was considered a bit of unreliable for that kind of a job. This was one of the very favorite pieces for a calligrapher to do was this Hilya. They loved the text so much because the text brings to you something of the love that Ali and the other people had for the Prophet, and so therefore when you copy it, you participate in that love a little bit. And when you keep it in your house, it's a very nice thing. It's a very special kind of event. This one line, for instance, here says, from his belly to his chest, there was no sign of any fat. Things like that. It says his body was softer than silk. Now, many of these things exist. Oh, here we go. Other ones have other kinds of ones. There's a hadith that Abdul Haq and I have never been able to substantiate. We've tried, but we can't hear it. But it's something to do with the importance of seeing the Prophet, and it uses that word in it. It's ruwiya an Ali radiyallahu ta'ala an, أنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من رأى حليتي من بعدي فكأنما رآني ومن رآها شوقا إلي حرم الله عليه النار ويأمن فتنة القبر ولا يحشر عاريا في يوم الحشر والقرار. To the effect that who sees my hilya, not meaning a piece of calligraphy, mind you, because the hilya itself is a words and a concept and a form in a sense. Who sees it is like seeing a vision of him or a dream of him. Who has seen it after me, it's as if he has actually seen me. And if he sees this hilya desiring me, loving him, God will save him from going to the nar. This was one by Hassan Rida, who was one of the great Quran copyists, and he is largely remembered for the Qurans that he's got still printed and still in existence today. Now, let's move to the next one. This one, believe it or not, in the very center of it's a hilya. It was written by Sheikh Abdul Aziz Rufai, one of the great Rufai sheikhs of the early 20th century. He, at the collapse of the empire, went to live in Egypt, and he taught all the early 20th century Egyptian calligraphers. He founded the Royal Academy of Calligraphy in Cairo. This one is mine. This is one where this is what I received my ijazat with. Now, in calligraphy, it's very common to, when you reach a certain point, you're asked to do a piece that will become your certificate. And so that was what happened in my case. My teacher, who's Hassan Chalabi, asked me to do a hilya, and I sent it to him in '86 or '88, and it was finished off, and that's what it looks like. And it has the certificates underneath. Those are the certificates, part of the same piece. Now these are various ones that I've done since then. I'll go through them briefly, and then we can get on with it. Okay, it's a pity they're all so dark. Okay, let's go. Okay, and this final one, this is what's called Karalama. It's a practice sheet for doing one, and then this is how you sort of set up as an exercise. This one here was one I did earlier this year. This one's now in the Asian Civilizations Museum in Singapore. Now that's all the slides.
तेरा आस्तां सखी